Good afternoon. We're back with more Marvel Champions, and today we'll be doing a leadership aspect spotlight, talking about the top 15 leadership cards. With aggression and justice, I talked about the top 15 plug-and-play cards. With leadership, it's just going to be the top 15 cards. The reason is that there are a few cards in leadership that are synergistic, that are so important to the overall strength of the leadership aspect, that are so important to a couple of different decks, that to do a leadership aspect spotlight and not talk about those cards would be a pretty incomplete picture of what leadership is. So we're going to not restrict the leadership aspect spotlight to plug and play cards, but just talk about the leadership aspect as a whole. And this video will be about the top 15 cards. So let's get started. Number 15 is Quinjet, coming from the Captain America Hero Pack. 1 cost support. After your turn begins, place 1 time counter on Quinjet. Put an Avenger ally from your hand into play with a printed cost equal to or less than the number of time counters on Quinjet. Then discard Quinjet. This is a great card because it can generate 2, 3, or 4 resources for you. It really needs to generate at least 3 resources to be worth it. If you pay 1 cost plus this card from hand and only generate 2 resources for an Avenger ally, it's functionally equivalent to having simply spent the resources on an ally, just with more steps and time involved. But if you get a 3 or 4 cost or even a 5 cost ally into play with Quinjet, it takes time for that to pay off, but when you eventually get the 3, 4, or 5 cost ally into play, you're getting cost reduction of 1, 2, or 3, which is very, very strong. So it takes some patience to play Quinjet. It's not a good card to draw very late in the game, and you don't get anything for it right away, but the payoff is quite large. And so I know that some people don't really like Quinjet, but I think this card is very, very strong. It's just like most cards that are strong in Marvel Champions, they take some time to pay off. There are very few cards that pay off their full strength rapidly, that are worth anything. I mean, there's some cards that are just fine that pay off their full strength immediately, but for cards that are very efficient, or that we would consider top tier, typically they take some time to pay off their full strength, and Quinjet is no exception. Number 14 is Regroup, coming from the Drax Hero Pack. Now, Regroup is quite niche, but it is powerful in its niche. It's a card that I initially overlooked when I was doing my progression series. That's because when Drax was released, along with Regroup, Moon Girl hadn't come out yet. Regroup is a 1 cost support. When an ally is defeated by an enemy attack, return it to its owner's hand instead of discarding it. When the round ends, discard this card. So you do need to know when the ally is going to be defeated to use this properly, but that's not too difficult. This card works best with Moon Girl. Moon Girl, a 3 cost card that can draw up to 3 cards depending on the number of science resources that you use to play her. And that effect can only happen when played from hand. White Tiger is another ally that draws cards, and that can only happen when she's played from hand. So if you're running a deck with Moon Girl and White Tiger, Regroup is very powerful because it can be used to generate resources using Moon Girl or White Tiger repeatedly. Not really generating resources because you have to pay for the card, but you are getting essentially a free or very low cost ally and cycling through your deck. Cycling through the deck is a big part of what the leadership aspect does, and that's good because on average the hero specific cards are better than the aspect cards. They're designed that way. The hero specific cards are nearly always more efficient or more powerful than any aspect cards, any of the 4 aspects. The 4 aspects are designed to fill in gaps in a hero's kit, not to be more powerful than the hero's kit, although there are cases where that is the case, where an aspect card is more powerful than a hero specific card, but generally they're designed, the hero specific cards, to be more powerful than the aspect cards. So if you have aspect cards that simply cycle themselves, That's good because it helps you get to your more powerful cards faster and reduce the penalty for playing aspect cards, the penalty being that they are less powerful than the hero specific cards. And that's what Regroup does when paired with White Tiger or Moon Girl. It helps you cycle through your deck faster in order to get to your more powerful cards more often, and it helps you to set up combos, some of which are really only, they require a card that's just one card in a 40 card deck. In like an Ant-Man deck, it can help you to cycle through using repeated plays of White Tiger to get to Ant-Man's helmet or something like that. With Nova, when you're playing Moon Girl and Regroup and then Moon Girl, it'll help you cycle through to get to your Unleash the Nova Force and other cards that you're looking for. That's why Regroup is strong, but it doesn't go very high up this list because it's really not that good with just White Tiger. I don't know that I would run it in any deck that I had White Tiger, but I would definitely run it in any leadership deck where I was playing White Tiger and Moon Girl, because in that context, it's a very strong card. It unfortunately does come from the Drax hero pack, which Drax is not a very strong hero due to his 4 hand size. Next up, we have Rapid Response coming from the Black Widow hero pack. Now, this card and Regroup and the next card that will come after have a huge caveat attached to their ranking, which is that they can go much higher than they are ranked in this video when played with the right ally, when played properly. For example, if you're using Rapid Response with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the basic version of him, one of the strongest allies in the game, Rapid Response could go as high as top 5 card in the game. If you're Rapid Responsing a fairly weak ally back into play, then Rapid Response may not belong on this list at all. So Regroup, Rapid Response, and the next card in this series, Make the Call, they all should come with a caveat that I have them ranked 12, 13, and 14, but it really depends on how you play them. It really varies their strength based on which ally they're being used with. And if they're being used in the optimal circumstances, they can go much higher than this. And if they're being used in suboptimal circumstances, they may not belong on the list at all. So the fact that they're ranked 12, 13, and 14 in this list should not really, it's not a hard and fast ranking in this circumstance, in this situation, because the cards are so variable. So they can go much higher or much lower. So Rapid Response is a 2-cost upgrade that comes from the Black Widow hero pack, max 1 per player. After an ally you control is defeated, discard Rapid Response, put that ally into play from your discard pile and deal 1 damage to it. This really excels with the Web Warrior cards, in particular Peter Parker. The Peter Parker and Rapid Response combo, when combined especially with Web of Life and Destiny, is an exceptional combo and is a big part of what makes the Web Warrior synergy the best synergy in the game, in my opinion, currently. And this video is as of 6/20/2023, June 20th. So we haven't seen the X-Force synergy yet, which has been previewed a little bit and will come out shortly. But currently the best synergy in the game is Web Warriors, and Rapid Response works well with the Web Warriors. You get to trigger any effects that happen when an ally enters play. You don't get to trigger any effects that happen when an ally is played from your hand. So no Moon Girl, no White Tiger. You can't redraw cards that way, unfortunately. Nonetheless, when played in the optimal circumstances or with a particularly strong 5-cost ally or something like that, or a 4-cost ally like Beast is very good with this card, because when he enters play you get to go find a resource card. So for 2 cost you get to replay Beast with 1 damage, which means you get another 2 damage from Beast, a chump block, and you get to grab a resource card, which is very strong for 1 2-cost card. When played in those circumstances, Rapid Response goes way up this list. But we have him at 13 because, well, frankly, there's no good reason why it should be at 13. I could make a case for it at 5. I could make a case for it at 15. I put it low down the list because of its variability in terms of how it's played. Number 12 is a card I previously mentioned, Make the Call, coming from the core set. Once again, with rapid response, highly variable based on the power of the ally it is coupled with. Zero cost event, pay the printed cost of an ally in any player's discard pile. Put that ally into play under your control. Again, varies based on the strength of the ally. It works great with an ally. One thing to note is that if you play it with Peter Parker, typically Peter Parker requires one of each resource to play him. A strength, a lightning, a science resource. If you use Make the Call with him, you don't have to pay those resource requirements. You can just pay 3 of any resource. So if you don't happen to have the specific resources to play Peter Parker, or you want to use those for other things, you can simply discard Peter Parker to pay for something else and then make the call him back into play. And he is so powerful that using an extra card in order to play him doesn't really make a difference. He's still really, really good. Make the Call just allows you to cycle more effectively because you can use a slot in your deck and replay a hero-specific ally, replay an ally that you would typically only play once per cycle, and so forth. I don't think I really need to go into a lot more detail because this card is similar to Rapid Response and in some cases Regroup, and these 3 cards really need to be discussed together, and they can go much higher on this list when played with very strong allies, or when played with weak allies they can not belong on the list at all, which is why I have them on the list but fairly low down. Number 11 is Beast, Hank McCoy, from the Cyclops Hero Pack. Beast is a 4-cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health. After Beast enters play, search your deck and discard pile for a resource card and add it to your hand. Beast is a card I like quite a lot, whether he's in an X-Men deck or not, because you get a resource card that generates 2 resources for free when you play Beast. You will get 4 thwart or 4 attack and a jump block for essentially 2 cost, which is very strong value. It's not exceptional, but it's very strong, and I include him in nearly every leadership deck now. He actually, in my opinion, provides a leadership provides an incentive to buy Cyclops all on his own, though it is underwhelming to buy a hero pack for an aspect card. But I do believe that Beast belongs in nearly any serious leadership deck because he is quite strong with his ability to grab that resource card. And there are some specific circumstances where this becomes even stronger than it seems, and those are worth noting. For example, when played in a Captain Marvel leadership deck, he can grab one of her hero-specific resource cards that generate 3 energy instead of the typical 2, and he becomes even stronger in that circumstance. When played with Nova, he can grab one of the resource cards that don't count against your hand size, and then you don't need to play that card that turn. You can go into the next turn with a hand size of 6 or 7 if you're in Alter Ego. So there are specific resource cards that Beast is even better with than he appears. Number 10 is Kaluu, coming to us from the Mad Titans Shadow expansion box. Kaluu is a 2-cost ally with 1 thwart, 1 attack, and 2 health. He does have the Avengers trait. After Kaluu enters play, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an event, add that event to your hand, shuffle your deck. He's similar to Maria Hill. He grabs a card. You get to grab a specific card, but with the caveat that you don't always get to grab a card because sometimes you don't find an event. When you don't find an event, Kaluu isn't very good. When you do find an event, he's good. He's not exceptional, but he's good. He's a cycle card, and we want as many cycle cards in our deck as possible from the aspect that we're playing because, as mentioned previously, that allows us to get through our deck quicker and to the more powerful hero-specific cards. That is a best-case scenario for an aspect card. Best-case scenario is that they're more powerful than the hero-specific cards, but that almost never happens. Second-best scenario is that they allow you to cycle through to your more powerful cards so that you can play them more often. And that is what Kaluu does. Number 9 is going to be Hawkeye, Clint, Barton from the core set. A 3-cost ally with 1 thwart, 1 attack, 3 health, and he enters play with 4 arrow counters. After a minion enters play, remove 1 arrow counter from Hawkeye and deal 2 damage to that minion. So if you're willing to leave Hawkeye on the table for a while, what you'll get from him is 10 damage for 3 cost and then a chump block. That is very, very strong value. And using Hawkeye with a card like Rapid Response is a core strategy in beating a tough scenario like Ultron on Heroic 1 difficulty or even on Expert difficulty. Hawkeye is essential to that strategy because you can play Hawkeye and then with Regroup and make the call, basically keep him on the table for the entire game in order to deal with those Ultron drones. And in solo play, if there's a better way to beat Ultron, I have not found it. He falls off a little bit in scenarios where there aren't a lot of minions. So he doesn't get included in every single leadership deck, but in scenarios where there are a lot of minions, this card is one of the highest value cards in the game. And in multiplayer, I would include him in every single leadership deck because it doesn't have to be a minion entering play to engage with you, the player controlling Hawkeye. It just says after a minion enters play, so he can fire at the minions engaging with your teammates as well, which makes it more likely to get full value out of Hawkeye. So I would include him in every single multiplayer leadership deck and quite a lot of single player leadership decks as well, because his upside is very, very high. A lot of value if you can leave him on the table long enough to take advantage of it. And in solo, a lot of the times you can't. You have to get a chump block for the cost. You can't spend 3 resources and wait 4 or 5 or 6 turns for all those arrow counters to go off in solo play sometimes. I think it'll be an option more often in multiplayer. But in solo play, sometimes he doesn't get included in decks if they're not bringing in minions fairly regularly. Number 8, Maria Hill from the core set. 2-cost ally, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 health. After Maria Hill enters play, each player draws a card. Strong value in solo play. Incredible value in multiplayer. One of, if not the best allies in the game in multiplayer. In a 4-player game, she draws 4 cards for the group, and you get 2 thwart and a chump block. That is amazing. I'm frankly surprised this card was printed. It's so strong for multiplayer, and even in solo play, if you're only drawing 1 card, it's still very strong. Roughly equivalent, though I would say not roughly equivalent, better than Kaluu because it always draws a card, and Kaluu doesn't always, and it provides 2 thwart. She provides 2 thwart instead of 1 thwart, but comparable to Kaluu and strong for similar reasons. But in multiplayer, just this card is off the charts and should be included in every leadership deck unless there's a specific synergy to pay attention to. Number 7, United We Stand from the Quicksilver Hero Pack. A 0-cost event, play only if your identity has the Avenger trait. Hero action, heal 1 damage from up to X friendly characters to a maximum of 3, where X is equal to the villain's stage number. I initially overlooked this card when I was doing my Hero Pack reviews because from the text of the card I thought that it was the scheme number and not the villain's stage number. It is in fact the stage number, so if you're playing on Expert difficulty, this card always heals at least 2 damage if you have 2 friendly characters on the board. And when you're healing 2 damage from an ally, if you heal 1 damage from 2 different allies, you're essentially getting 4 additional thwart or 4 additional attack, typically depending on what the stats are of the allies in question. But 4 attack or 4 healing for 0 cost is fantastic, even if you only get 2 attack from 1 ally and then 1 healing from your hero. That's still very good value. And when you head into stage 3 in an Expert difficulty quest, you get 3 characters healed, or 2 and 1 from your hero. That's fantastic. This card, its downside of only healing for 1, that doesn't happen that much. In a leadership deck, you nearly always have an ally on the board that needs healing because they take consequential damage. And you all, of course, always have your hero on the table. And this card only gets better in multiplayer because in multiplayer it's more likely that you're going to have 2 ally targets, which is the ideal usage for this card. So it's something that I initially overlooked, but now I include in every single leadership deck if your identity has the Avenger trait. So it's not plug and play, but it is very strong and very worthy of inclusion in Avengers decks because of its high value and low cost. Number 6, To Me, My X-Men from the Storm Hero Pack. This is another card that is not plug and play as it requires the X-Men trait. It is a 1-cost event, playable only if your identity has the X-Men trait. Search the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally and put it into play. If that ally is still in play at the end of the phase, add it to your hand. So here is how I look at this card. A, you typically get 2 damage from it if you're playing an X-Men deck, because the X-Men will, or 2 thwart, because the X-Men ally that enters play will then attack or thwart for 2 typically. And then you also get to trigger that ally's enters play effect, which can be something like Beast that generates a resource card, which is phenomenal. It can be something like the Professor, where he confuses an enemy or readies one of your X-Men cards, which is phenomenal. And then, if the ally is still in play at the end of the phase being after you've drawn your hand, then you add that ally to your hand. So you could essentially read this card as drawing a card and giving you 2 damage and triggering, or 2 thwart, and triggering an enters play effect. And that is phenomenal value for 1 cost. You can build a deck around this card, the X-Men Allies deck. None of the X-Men Allies, well, few of the X-Men Allies are that good. But with, to me, my X-Men being so powerful, it elevates the X-Men synergy. And so any deck that I'm building around an X-Men hero, I would consider, at least for solo play, leadership and To Me, My X-Men, along with Uncanny X-Men, which we'll talk about shortly, because those cards with the X-Men heroes are very, very strong, and they make leadership the best aspect to play for the X-Men heroes, at least in solo play, with the possible exception of Gambit or Wolverine in scenarios where aggression is very good, in particular Gambit. Number 5 is Team Training, coming from the Rise of Red Skull box. It's a 2-cost support, play under any player's control, 1 per player. Each ally you control gets +1 hit point, which means for each ally that enters play, they will get an additional 2 thwart typically, or 2 attack, possibly only 1. But for this card to get full value, all it really needs to do is be in play when that happens for 3 allies. And leadership decks tend to be heavy in allies, so that's not that hard to accomplish. You can also pair it with something like Uncanny X-Men or Mighty Avengers to get even more value out of it. So it doesn't get you value immediately, but over time it just provides value every single turn, as typically leadership wants to play an ally almost every turn. And each of the allies that you play will get more value than they otherwise would have. So very quickly this card pays itself off and then becomes very, very strong. The caveat being that it is not very good if you draw it in the latter part of the game where you only have a couple of turns left and don't have time to get full value out of Team Training. In that scenario, you're just going to throw away Team Training to pay for something else. Number 4, Mighty Avengers, coming from the Mad Titan Shadow box. Looking at Marvel card database, I don't see that many Mighty Avengers decks, and that surprises me because I consider this one of the strongest cards in the game. I think it's so building the strongest leadership deck that you can, not using the Mighty Avengers, and then comparing it to the strongest leadership deck that you can build using the Mighty Avengers card, at least for heroes that have the Avengers trait. It's close, but I believe Mighty Avengers is stronger. It is, for characters that have the Avengers trait, the strongest leadership deck that you can build is the deck built around Mighty Avengers, United We Stand, and Quinjet. and then using the more expensive leadership cards. Mighty Avengers is a 3-cost support. Play under any player's control, max 1 team card per player. If each of your characters has the Avengers trait, each ally you control gets +1 thwart and +1 attack. So, similar to team training, each ally that comes into play gets additional value, and that +1 thwart and +1 attack can make a big difference and will rapidly get the board under control once you get it into play. The difficulty is getting it into play because you basically have to waste a turn on the turn that it enters play, since it costs 3 and it doesn't provide you with anything right away. Once you've got it established, and then you've got Avengers coming into play every round, this card rapidly becomes very, very strong, and the deck you play rapidly becomes very strong, and you have little difficulty establishing control over the board with a Mighty Avengers deck. I like this card a lot. I think it's very, very strong, and I think for nearly any Avengers hero, a Mighty Avengers deck is the way to go. Doesn't hurt that it comes from a box that has a lot of strong leadership cards. Mad Titan Shadow is a great box for leadership. Number 3, Uncanny X-Men, coming from the Storm Hero Pack. Storm was a great hero pack for the X-Men synergy and for leadership. 3-cost support. Play under any player's control, max 1 team card per player. Each of your X-Men allies gets +1 hit point. If each of your characters has the X-Men trait, each of your X-Men allies cost 1 fewer resource to play. Phenomenal card. It's even stronger than Mighty Avengers. This belongs in every X-Men team comp. It belongs, if you're playing solo, it's almost always going to be leadership because of Uncanny X-Men, with the exception of Gambit, who's just too much fun and sometimes too strong with aggression. Even with Gambit, though, it's questionable because aggression gives Gambit enormous burst potential, but Uncanny X-Men is just incredible value. The +1 hit point on each ally means you get an additional 2 damage or 2 thwart for most of your allies, and the -1 cost makes all of them more efficient to play and essentially pays for this card if you play 3 X-Men allies. It's really a phenomenal card. Really, really strong. And was sorely needed for the X-Men synergy to be viable, because none of the X-Men, well, not none of them, but most of the X-Men were kind of underwhelming to me before I saw Uncanny X-Men. But this does make Storm an essential hero pack for any X-Men player, because you just gotta have Uncanny X-Men for your team comp, or for most of the X-Men heroes to be even close to viable. It is only each of your X-Men allies, and not any X-Men ally. Interesting that the wording was different from Mighty Avengers. Mighty Avengers said each ally you control. Uncanny X-Men says each of your X-Men allies. I'm not sure if there's any difference, except for the wording. But anyway, Uncanny X-Men is a very, very high value card. Number 2, Captain America, Steve Rogers, coming from the Mad Titan Shadow box. He, of course, comes with the caveat that he is only strong in an Avengers deck. 6-cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 4 health, and toughness. The ideal usage for Captain America is to use that toughness to defend a boss attack, then get 6 damage or 6 thwart, and then defend another boss attack as a chump block. Reduce the cost to play Captain America by 1 for each Avenger character you control. So, you always get cost reduction of 1 if you're running an Avenger hero. If you have 1 Avenger ally on the table, you reduce his cost to 4. For 4, he's not exceptional, but he is very, very strong. If you can reduce his cost to 3, which in an Avengers deck is not that difficult, then he is exceptional. He's one of the best allies in the game in that circumstance. And if you're running an Avengers deck, you're probably running Stinger and other relatively cheap Avengers allies. It's not that difficult to get an extremely high value Captain America into play. At the least, you can almost always get him into play for 4 cost, which is very, very strong. Not quite exceptional in that circumstance, but very, very strong for 4 cost. And for 3, he is exceptional, and that happens quite a lot. So he's one of the highest value allies in the game for an Avengers deck, but he is garbage outside of the Avengers deck. And number 1 is White Tiger, Ava Ayala, coming from the Mad Titan Shadow box again. And White Tiger is a 3-cost ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 health. After you play White Tiger from your hand, draw X cards to a maximum of 3, where X is equal to the villain's stage number. If the villain has no stage number, draw 1 card. So for an expert level quest, you're guaranteed 2 card draw along with 2 thwart or 2 attack and a chump block. Essentially you get the 2 thwart or 2 attack and a chump block for 1 cost, and you get to cycle through your deck to get to your more powerful hero specific cards. This is the best ally in the game for leadership. Moon Girl's got White Tiger beat for a champion synergy deck, but best leadership ally in the game. Not the best overall ally. I would say Moon Girl and Peter Parker are both better, but best leadership ally in the game. And I would put this in every single leadership deck ever, as I always play on expert difficulty or higher. Nearly always, except for something like, well, no, actually I always do. I take that back. So I always play White Tiger in my leadership decks, auto include, and probably worth the cost of the Mad Titan Shadow box all on her own. But you also get Kaluu, who's very plug and play and goes in nearly every leadership deck. And then you get cards like Mighty Avengers, which are very, very strong in Avengers decks, along with Captain America. So Mad Titan Shadow is really an incredible box for leadership. Not very strong heroes, but very, very strong for leadership aspect cards. And would I play White Tiger if I was playing on a standard difficulty quest? Probably not. You would get 1, 2... I mean, she's not bad value. If you're only drawing 1 card, I might still include her. She's not bad value, but she's exceptional and plug and play against expert difficulty quests, and beyond exceptional when you're in stage 3. This is a very, very strong leadership card and an Avenger, so it works with Mighty Avengers or with Captain America. So let's take a look at the totals. We have 4 cards on this list coming from the Mad Titan Shadow box, and 3 cards coming from the core set, which is good news because it means you can make a pretty strong leadership deck with just the core set and Mad Titan Shadow and maybe Black Widow. If you just get those 3 things, you're in great shape for a strong leadership deck. Core set has 3 cards, Storm has 2, they're both X-Men cards. The Rise of Red Skull has 1, Quicksilver has 1, Cyclops has 1, Black Widow has 1, Captain America has 1, and Drax has 1. But really, if you just get the Mad Titan Shadow box and the core set and Black Widow for rapid response, you'll be in great shape, and you'll be off to a roaring start for taking on those difficult expert or heroic 1 quests. So that is our leadership aspect spotlight, and thank you for watching.